I'd like to call this meeting of the Zoning Committee of the Plan Commission to order. I guess the first order of business is, do we have a quorum?
We do. I can do a formal roll call if you wish.
No, I think for a committee meeting, it should be okay, as long as you guys are good with that.
Yes, we'll just note, and for those in the Zoom participants, that Chair Lindwall is here and Commissioner Westerberg is here, and they're identified on the Zoom meeting as well.
All right, and I'm presuming there are no minutes that we have to deal with.
For this meeting, I don't believe so.
All right. So the agenda item for the zoning committee is really consideration of the micro dwelling unit.
Correct.
Discussion. Do you want to?
Chair Lindwall, before we get started, if there could be a motion to suspend the
I'm
rules
sorry.
for electronic participation for this meeting.
Chris, would you like to make that motion?
I will move that the electronic rules be suspended for this meeting.
I will second, or authorizing allowing the use of electronic. Is that what we want to say? Yes.
Yes, using the Zoom platform in this
Yes.
case.
I'll second. Megan, I think that does have to be a roll call, does it not?
Yes, technically it does.
All right, we'll be quick.
All right. The Commissioner Westerberg
Yes.
and Commissioner Lindwall.
Yes.
All right. That passes.
All right. Scott or Megan, would you like to provide just a brief overview of kind of where we are to kind of frame the discussion for our audience?
Yeah, sure. I have it's just a repeat of the presentation that was given at the Plan Commission meeting. So I will pull that up. All right, can everyone see that?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, good. All right, so in August, a few months ago, we began this discussion on micro dwelling units, or as more commonly known as tiny homes. The applicant, who's Andrew Gallimore, he submitted this text amendment application with the intent to establish some guidelines for being able to construct this type of dwelling unit throughout the city. He does have a particular lot that he does own that he was looking to put a tiny home on as well. Now, during the August meeting, we did begin discussion, and I listed some of the main discussion points here. One was creating an alternative name for the structures, so not tiny homes or actually micro dwelling units. We want to make sure that we kind of get the point across that these are not meant to be mobile structures or recreational vehicles or anything of that nature. They're meant to be affixed to a permanent foundation. We also discussed briefly adding language that explicitly prohibits the use of mobile homes and recreational vehicles as tiny homes. We spent a good amount of discussion addressing common ownership of zoning lots. We briefly discussed creating additional regulations regarding the structure size, design, and setbacks. And then there was a very brief suggestion about considering just a certain type of lot or a smaller lot that does not meet a particular zoning district standard size for this particular type of home. So these are the originally proposed changes that were presented at that meeting. Provide the definition, a proposed definition that would have the micro dwelling unit having a ground floor area of 500 square feet or less. And that would be that would only be one dwelling unit surrounded by open space on a particular zoning lot. These would be permitted in all of the residential zoning districts. There would be only one permitted per zoning lot, or one principal use on that zoning lot, but there would be the ability to construct multiple tiny homes on a zoning lot if a special use was also approved for that particular request. Let's see, we did have some proposed setbacks that generally meet the bulk requirements or the setbacks for some of our accessory dwelling units. The maximum building height that we propose would be 28 feet. Building lot coverage and impervious surface coverage. We suggested that the maximum building lot coverage and impervious surface coverage comply with what's in the underlying zoning district, but would be limited to no less than 700 square feet, regardless of the lot size. So this was a pretty short list of some vacant properties that were more so railroad or city-owned properties. I know there was an idea of seeing if there were additional vacant lots throughout the city that were privately owned, and that is something that we could look into as we further the discussion this evening. So.
Okay. So would it be appropriate first to have now any public comment with respect to this issue? Is that the next
Well, I
order?
don't know if Andrew, he's on this call. Yes, he's on the call. I don't know if Andrew, you wanted to speak to this in further detail.
Sure. You know, I'll just say that I was on the Zoning Board of Appeals previously, and that time we saw a lot of applicants come and they just wanted to make minor changes to their homes, just so that it would allow them to stay in their house in Evanston and just let the house continue to meet the needs of growing families. And it wasn't always easy or even possible to get something as simple as that approved. And I just saw a real need for affordable housing in the city. Around the same time, I kind of became interested in starter homes as a way to meet those kind of needs. Obviously, we're talking about homes on a permanent foundation. I know that was a concern last time that we were talking about mobile homes, and obviously that's not what we're intended. Just something that could be an affordable structure, pretty maintenance-free and energy efficient just due to the sheer nature of its size. And then in addition to the new construction aspect of it. It's something that's really personal to me. I live in a multi-generational household. I do have an older brother with special needs. He's high functioning and very independent, but also needs his own space. So kind of looking into this more, I realized that a tiny home would be the ideal solution for my family. It would give my brother the ability to live close enough that he could come visit my family when he wanted, but yet have his own independent life. But what I like about this is that there's these lots are scattered across the city. So for him, it would give him the opportunity to have a small home with a yard. He wouldn't be confined to an apartment type setting. He could be closer to amenities like schools, public transportation. He doesn't drive. Shopping districts. You know, he wouldn't be segregated into a certain area of the city where those things don't exist. And then, you know, something small with a second bedroom would be ideal for him, or it's for a guest, potential caregiver in the future, or even a roommate to help him be more financially independent. As Megan said, I purchased a small lot on Noy Street. Came to find out real quickly that just the uniqueness and the narrowness of the lot presented a lot of challenge. Most of them we could overcome, but we couldn't overcome all the zoning difficulties, mostly due to the side setbacks. After a lot of discussion with the zoning staff, we realized that there might be other lots out there that would benefit from a set of defined standards. So rather than pursuing a minor variance for myself, we decided to actually ask for this text amendment. Again, it would only apply to structures with a ground floor area of less than 500 square feet. I know in the last meeting, there was a lot of concern that people might split off part of their lots or further subdivide existing lots to allow for something like this. And obviously the zoning code doesn't allow you to subdivide and create substandard lots. So that isn't an issue. But I wanted to clarify that because I know that was something of concern last time. And like Megan said, we're really just proposing smaller side setbacks of 3 feet for interior side setbacks versus 5 on a street side lot, such as a corner lot, 10 foot versus 15. Staff thought maybe even a 5 foot side setback might be appropriate in some situations. A lot of these just mirror what the coach houses currently have, 28 foot height limit. Initially, we asked for no parking requirement if within 1,500 feet of a transportation stop. Coach houses have actually been granted no parking requirement, so that's something we thought might be reasonable to update in the request. And then again, 700 minimum square foot in any district, which would allow for a 500 square foot house, or just under 500 square foot house with a parking pad or a shed or whatever you might need to add. Anything more than that, as Megan said, would require a special use. So if someone wanted to come and build, multiple houses of this site of the size, they would need a special use. It wouldn't be something that would be granted. And again, this is only, like I said, only applicable to lots of record. Someone can't just further subdivide their lot to create something like this. This is just some lots that are scattered throughout the city. They exist, but they're not everywhere, and people wouldn't be able to just further subdivide lots. That's the basics of my proposal. I'm open to any questions, and I know there's other people here to give public comments that could probably speak better to some of the equity and public benefits that something like this might provide to the city. So I just thank you for your time today.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to make a comment? I think you could raise your hand in the participants thing, or otherwise, I think, thank you. Anybody else? No. I think then we can move to.
I think Mr. Marcus might be raising his hand.
Oh,
Yeah, Robinson Marcus.
okay.
He signed up ahead of time as well.
Oh, that's right.
Hi there. And I think Sue Lolbach with Joining Forces is also on the call. So I imagine she might be here to give public comment. Yeah, good evening to members of the zoning committee, city staff, residents in attendance. My name is Robinson or Robbie Marcus. I'm a 4th Ward resident, also an employee owner with the Evanston Development Cooperative. And I am here today to encourage you to support this micro dwelling unit ordinance. To really think about the housing costs in the Evanston community these days. As of the city's 2020 consolidated plan, 40.1% of all households, that's renter or owner, are cost burdened or severely cost burdened. So that means that at least 30% of their income is going towards housing. This burden also falls disproportionately on people of color. So we know 51% of Evanston's Black households are cost burdened or severely cost burdened, and 55% of Evanston's Latinx households are cost burdened or severely cost burdened. And so I really believe that we must continually advance policy solutions, including like the one we have before us tonight, to address the high cost of housing in this community. The other thing I specifically want to talk about tonight is really the connection between low density zoning regulations and how they've served as a policy mechanism to historically segregate neighborhoods by class and by race. As the researchers Douglas Massey and Jonathan Roswell find in a 2014 study analyzing 49 cities across the United States, and I quote, "Anti-density zoning increases Black residential segregation in US metropolitan areas by reducing the quantity of affordable housing in white jurisdictions." So if Evanston is to proactively address these challenges of housing costs and systematic racism, then I believe we must allow for more flexible land use policies, such as this micro dwelling unit ordinance. It would really allow us to activate sort of underutilized irregular lots that don't meet those minimum lot size requirements, which likely are currently sitting vacant right now. Given the size of these principal structures, I think there's an argument to be made that they could perhaps be more naturally occurring affordable housing in relation to nearby housing structures. And then also, given the number of city-owned lots that could benefit from this ordinance, I'm also optimistic about the opportunity there for affordable housing. Specifically on parking, I do want to add to Mr. Gallimore's note that, with the ADU ordinance, the Plan Commission and City Council set the precedent to waive an additional off-street parking requirement. So perhaps that could also be a consideration with the ordinance before us today. So thank you for listening, and
Okay.
appreciate your time.
All right. And then I think Sue, and I also would like to make a note that we need to end this meeting at about 6:50 because we have the Plan Commission, the full Plan Commission happening right after that. So.
Yes. Okay, well, thank you. I'm Sue Lolbach. I work at Connections for the Homeless, and I lead our coalition called Joining Forces for Affordable Housing. I'm here tonight to speak in favor of this text amendment. According to the DePaul Institute for Housing Studies, there's a shortage of at least 6,000 affordable dwelling units in Evanston and Skokie combined. Some of the people who need affordable housing are homeless, but most of them are not. Instead, they're burdened by the costs of their housing. The less money a household makes, the greater their housing cost burden. And because income is disproportionately lower among people of color, as described in the city's consolidated plan, we know that people of color disproportionately suffer from the deepest level of housing cost burden, which is devastating to a household's ability to achieve well-being and its members' ability to reach their potential as human beings. There are many solutions to addressing the problem of affordable housing, and we need to make use of all of those solutions. One of them is to update our zoning through a lens of racial equity and affordability. This is something we can do as a big project through a new comprehensive plan or a zoning review, but we can also do it right now, and we can do it ordinance by ordinance. The goals would include allowing use of land in flexible and creative ways to create affordable housing, removing restrictions that support segregation and high-end housing while creating barriers to affordability, and streamlining processes and approvals to reduce costs and eliminate barriers. The proposed text amendment moves Evanston's zoning code in the right direction. First, it will remove restrictions that make otherwise usable parcels of land unusable simply because of zoning. Many of these parcels are owned by the city, which is in an excellent position to leverage them as a way of increasing the supply of affordable housing. And second, because the parcels are small enough to limit the sizes of the dwellings they can accommodate, their use as affordable housing will do at least a small part to distribute smaller units throughout the community, increasing the choices that people with lower incomes have as to where they will live. With this text amendment, there may be some concerns related to density, for instance, parking. However, when there is a choice between affordability and convenience, and creating affordability is seldom easy or comfortable, we are asking that the city, without fail, choose affordability. Too many people's futures are at risk due to housing cost burden, and the urgency is growing due to the pandemic, which we expect to increase housing cost burden significantly over the coming year. So we hope that the city will successfully move this text amendment through the review and approval process quickly. Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else? Not, then I would suggest we close public comment and move on to our committee discussion. I have one question to kind of start before we go on for staff. Does Evanston have a minimum dwelling unit size requirement or limitation? I don't remember seeing anything.
I don't believe there's anything specifically within the zoning ordinance. You would still need to meet property maintenance codes and building codes for size.
Yeah, okay. Just to clarify that there's nothing that would prohibit a tiny home anywhere that you know of.
That's correct. Yep.
Okay, good. Chris, you have any comments or thoughts?
A couple of questions. I know we had talked about it, the issue of making sure that lots couldn't be subdivided to allow for construction of tiny homes, so that what we're really talking about is, as I understand it, an currently unused lot or a single lot as defined being used to construct a tiny home. Is that correct? It's really a question for staff, I guess.
Yes, obviously any new lot to be created would need to go through the subdivision process. Would generally need to meet the lot size requirements, lot width requirements, or receive a variation in order to be subdivided below those minimum requirements.
And is the intent, with this, with tiny homes, I understand the concern for affordable housing, but with the size limitations that this imposes, you're not really talking about housing families on this, correct? Is the intent simply to provide a more flexible form of housing for folks of different types, but not necessarily addressed to families? Is that correct?
I think it could lend itself to, single person households, someone with, a single parent with a child, a couple. It would be a smaller household, someone with, maybe two parents and a child. It wouldn't be a large family per se. Unless you did a 2-story. I mean, I guess if you did a 2-story, I'm more concerned with a single story, but I guess in theory, a 2-story could have 3 bedrooms.
Yeah, so it would be somewhere between what 500 square foot footprint is what's proposed. So
Right.
2 stories obviously be 1,000 square feet. If you have a basement, be up to 1,500 square feet.
Right. I will say that I think even with the fact that we want these to be foundation homes as opposed to tiny house on wheels or anything mobile like that, I don't know that they will be all that cheap to build. I think it's great if they can be affordable, but tiny homes can run the gamut from 20,000 to 200,000 these days. So just think that's something the city needs to keep in mind.
I think you're right, but I think just by the nature of their size, they're still going to be more affordable than anything else you could build.
Okay. Chris, any other comments at this point?
I'm just inclined to keep the parking space required for a micro dwelling unit. If they are located within the 1,500 feet from transportation, then I think that should be waived. But again, just inclined to pay attention to the neighborhood and not put any more parking burdens with these. How do you feel about that, Jean?
I could go either way on the parking, but I have a number of other, kind of concerns or suggestions, because, at the last meeting and the Plan Commission discussion, we really were kind of going blind on how many lots there are that might meet these requirements. And there are, the way the county assessor assesses property, they assign a tax classification to each kind of property. And so it's a relatively easy research effort, particularly if the city has access to the geographic information, database from the county, to identify all of the vacant lots in Evanston that are privately owned. It doesn't really help for anything that's publicly owned. And to do an overlay of where they, which residential zoning districts they apply to. So I think that that's something that before we move a lot further on, we ought to get that evaluation done. Similarly, there's another code that identifies property that are essentially side lots. They're vacant parcels in common ownership with an adjacent parcel. And I just looked, did a quick run, and there are like 300 of those within the city, not all of which, and those strictly apply to residential property. And I don't know the extent to which those are needed to create a viable building zoning lot at this point, or whether or not they would have the ability to be subdivided to accommodate a tiny home. And then finally, I think we really kind of need, I had mentioned this at the last meeting, there are essentially some transition rules that talk about general lot and bulk controls with respect to parcels that had at any time been in common ownership since December 2nd of 1960. And I think that as we're working our way through this, we need to look at those transition rules to see how they might need to be adjusted to accommodate the tiny homes in an appropriate, or the micro dwelling units in appropriate place. And that section of the zoning ordinance is 6-4-1-8A. So those are things that I think we need to do a little bit of more research so that we understand exactly where these uses might happen. The other question I've got is, I know the lot in question is really kind of, is very small. But there are a lot of lots that are vacant land in the area that are in the, 3,000 square foot range. And so I guess the question becomes, what size, a dwelling unit would you accommodate on that? I presume in part it would be driven by the current setback requirements.
I mean, the current setbacks make it not feasible. That was the main issue
Yeah,
with my
well,
lot.
on your lot for sure, but on a 3,700 square foot lot, you probably could build something, although, maybe not as much as you couldn't build a really large house and still fall within the setback requirements. But I think the other thing we need to look at is right now there's 35-foot lot width requirement, and there are going to be some lots, yours in for one, and I noticed, when I was looking around for similar properties, there are a couple of others in the neighborhood that also have lot widths that would not be conforming with the zoning requirements, and I think that would need to be addressed as well. Just by I would like
In
to
what way?
I'm not I think that I agree with the speakers that say that we should work to accommodate these where they're appropriate on the available land, because I do think it lends itself to affordable housing. But I also think we probably, in moving forward in presenting a recommendation, I think we need to have a little bit more research done so that the full plan commission understands what kind of what the universe is out there, and how, so we can think through the implications from a land use policy perspective.
Okay, I mean, it is my understanding that even though 35 is the minimum lot width requirement, if you have a lot of you can't subdivide below that. But we're talking solely about existing lots of record, nothing that's newly created, things that have been in existence, 50, 100 years.
Right, and to your point about where the available lots are, I mean, that is something that we can take a look at, but it just would need to be with an understanding that wouldn't be perfect information, because I mean, you may have a vacant lot that is maybe not common ownership in that it's the exact same name. It may be under some other type of land entitlement. There are a lot of situations where we have to go lot by lot and take a look at what the particular limitations or circumstances are for that particular lot. But I do think we can probably take a look at the assessor to get a better idea of what private property may be available, and maybe do a general quick look to see if a vacant lot that could be buildable versus something that we would consider a zoning lot with
Not buildable
property.
I think that piece of information would be helpful for the discussion, at the with the full commission. Chris, what are your thoughts?
No, I think that would be helpful. I mean, one of the issues is some communities, obviously, as staff have pointed out, have built almost pocket neighborhoods for tiny homes. And I know Vancouver has laneway houses, which they allow to be built basically in alleys throughout the city. But I don't think there are that many communities that have just said, well, we'll start letting tiny homes be built on different lots, and what that really means in terms of how the lots are used and how many lots and what they're adjacent to. I think it's just helpful to have a little more information on that.
Okay.
Sorry, had a ringing phone I wanted to silence. All right. Well, I think that my question for staff would be how, difficult or I think that having information and having it come back to the full commission for consideration would be appropriate. I'm not sure that, I don't have, Chris, do you have significant issues with the draft language that, other than additional more research, and so we understand the discussion or the options a little better? And then I would also suggest that we look at the, the bulk standards, because I think that we may need to modify those to facilitate tiny houses, in addition to having regulations as to where they'd be allowed.
I think so. I mean, I think it would be good to know whether it does make sense to allow them in all residential zoning districts, or if lots fall into certain types of districts.
I think you're going to find that a lot of these smaller lots that are in private hands are going to be common ownership lots adjacent to residences and are just used as larger yards for the homeowners. I think that the nice thing though about having them in different neighborhoods, not just one neighborhood. I know the last meeting someone suggested maybe just having them in manufacturing neighborhoods to begin with, and that kind of defeats the point of giving people equitable access to, public amenities that they want to be near, that they necessarily can't afford to buy the mansion on the corner.
No, and I can understand that, and you're right. I mean, it's preferable to have things spread throughout a city and to be able to accommodate people that way. It's just helpful to know what types of lots we're talking about and what type of impact this has, especially with, as Jean has pointed out, just the regulations, the bulk regulations.
Oh, you muted, Andrew.
Sorry, I have a dog barking, so I keep muting it. Is there a specific bulk regulation or certain ones that, that you might point out as that you have questions about? So when I discuss with staff later prior to the next meeting, we might be able to talk more in depth about those specific concerns.
Well, I think that in part it's a carryover. These are the controls I'm looking at are carryovers from when the zoning ordinance was adopted in 1993, which frankly seemed to be outdated and hard to administer, especially if the goal here is to create options for, making it easier for people to identify and build on those lots. Because right now there's a provision that if the lot in question, that you're looking at has ever been in common ownership with an adjacent parcel going back to 1960, then you can't have, then then that lot is non-buildable.
I'm going to ask Melissa for clarification here, but I believe previously on the zoning board, we talked about if they were two vacant, unimproved lots that in common ownership that they could not be built on, but if they are two common ownership lots and one had been improved, the unimproved lot could still be improved. Is that still correct, Melissa, or has that been changed since I was on the zoning board?
It has not changed, and ultimately that situation comes up once in a blue moon. I think the last one that it came up on was your property, Andrew, one of your other properties.
Okay. Right. So if you have two common ownership lots, so let's say 1940, one was built on and the other lot was left vacant. Yeah. That vacant lot is still able to be built on. Whereas if they were both two vacant lots, the builder never built on either of them, then they were forced to be combined, because at that point you're building on tracts of land. But if you had one that said, if it was subdivided along the guidelines at the time, you built on one, the other one was still buildable, and that still holds true then.
Yeah, but my point is that if we're creating regulations to facilitate the development on these substandard lots, we ought to clean up the regulations so that it doesn't have, it's not a question in the future.
Right. No, I understand. I'm just trying to clarify, because I think that might actually be addressed in the code. But if there was something specific, I just want to be able to work on staff with that and get you the right answers.
Yeah, I'm just trying to kind of clean it up to make, you know, if we're gonna go this route, and as I said, I'm supportive of using available vacant land for, you know, and I'm happy with it being all over the city as well. But, you know, I want to make sure that our rules really reflect policy and that we understand the policy that's being created, which means that I think you ought to know where the lots are and what kinds of situations might arise. Because I mean, I can see somebody with a, you know, a 10,000 square foot lot deciding that they do want to subdivide and create, you know, their 7,200 square foot lot and their 2,800 square foot lot, put a tiny house on it.
Right,
I'm
and
I'm not sure that I have a problem with that, but we ought to be talking through the policy.
Right, and I don't know if I have a problem with that or not, but I think that for the code, I think Melissa will back me up on this. If it's one lot of a certain size, if it's not large enough to be subdivided into 2 standard lots, they could not do that anyway. So I think that might be right.
But,
well, thank you.
the question then becomes, if you're trying to encourage affordable housing and you have a situation where you could create a lot that would be suitable for a, you know, a tiny home or, you know, a micro dwelling unit.
Right.
That's something that we want to prohibit, or is something that could be encouraged?
In that case, if an applicant wanted to do that, it would trigger variations for the subdivision. And to go through that subdivision process, then we would also want to see what that tiny home would be like, so that the whole thing would be treated as one
A
proposal.
development sort of thing.
And I would assume, you know, a lot of that size, they probably just build a large coach house, most likely. So they would have the ability to do some kind of affordable housing.
Yeah, and you know, with the accessory dwelling unit options now, I mean, that again kind of complicates the discussion a little bit, because you can do that anyway.
Right.
But on the lots of you know, the smaller, you've got kind of a couple of categories. You've got the substandard lot that are scattered all over Evanston, and then you've got some that are larger, where, you know, just on any lot you can do an accessory dwelling unit now. So you don't know what, I mean, don't know what people will do, and just want to make sure that, I think as a plan commission, we want to make sure that whatever policy is furthered through the amendment is one that everyone is in agreement with.
Gotcha. Okay, makes sense.
Okay, Chris, anything else to add? And I guess we need to figure out which direction we want to go.
So, nothing specific to add at this point. I just think each lot will be different, and it's good to get some sense of how this would shake out in a couple of cases.
Do you think this needs to come back to the zoning committee as a committee, or is this something that when we have staff's analysis and information, it could go back to the plan commission for consideration?
Question maybe for staff on that, in terms of how they feel they might be able to collect the information.
I mean, we can start collecting the information and revise some of what we already presented. I mean, it really is up to the committee whether or not they feel like you want to have a bit more discussion on some of the specifics before bringing it back to the full commission. There's one point, just brief, I'm trying to remember some of the finer points in the previous discussion. I think there was at least one comment regarding design. We can't get too specific into what a particular tiny home would look like, but like my particular thoughts would be to just keep this similar to a regular single family home as possible. I mean, that would be including having entries in a certain location and things of that nature. Another comment I do recall was regarding some of the setbacks. I think there was at least one commissioner that had a concern about the setback being 3 feet, being fairly close to other properties. And then if that is something that you are generally okay with, we can keep that and just have a bigger discussion at Plan Commission. So I just want to try to address some of the other questions and concerns before bringing it back.
I think a couple of
You
us
know,
have
Mike-
concerns on the setback, so that might be something to revisit on the side setbacks.
If I could just point out real quick, if you notice, most of the houses in Evanston are older housing stock, and 3 feet was the old standard. So the majority of the homes are going to have a 3-foot side setback. So oftentimes in the zoning board, people would want to do like for instance, my mother-in-law had a 1950s built ranch. If they wanted to do a second story addition, they had to come before the zoning board to get a variance because they're building over the existing foundation, but they're within 3 feet of the current setback. And my lot in particular, they're all old bungalows. Every house is 2.5 to 3 feet apart. So it's not unusual to have 3 feet. I think that's the norm more than the standard.
And I agree, it's not unusual. I'm just questioning whether for new construction, if we are going to adopt a kind of a new product here, whether that really should be the standard. That's all.
Okay. Sounds good. Thank you. I just wanted to point that out just from
Understood.
all the homes that I've walked around and seen.
Okay.
Thank you.
And I'm okay with, I don't know that we need to do anything specific with design. I think that can follow the standard process for single family houses. So I think.
Okay.
And my feeling is I would be comfortable with this going back to the full plan commission. I'm not sure that the zoning committee can add much more at this point. So I guess, do you need a motion with direction?
We would need a motion to bring it back to the full commission, and maybe with some possible condition of adding additional language or additional research or something along those.
Okay. Well, I've got notes. I'm sure it's probably not the best for the chairman to make the motion. But since there are only two of us, I would like to move that that the staff conduct additional research on the location of the vacant tax parcels that are coded as vacant land, the location of parcels that are owned by an adjacent owner within each residential district, an analysis or an evaluation of the lots that do not meet the minimum lot sizes, and the potential impact on doing a micro dwelling unit on what it would look like in the neighbor, to the adjacent property. Certainly not design, but just kind of getting a general discussion of so a couple of examples of what that might look like. And particularly on lots that might be big enough to do multiple micro dwelling units on the lot. And then finally, I would like to have staff look at the general lot and bulk control standards and see if adjustments need to be made to the language of that section of the zoning code in order to facilitate the development of micro dwelling units. Is that Chris?
I would second that motion.
All right. So I guess we have a roll call. Right?
Yes.
Someone?
Right. Commissioner Westerberg
Yes.
and Chair Linwall.
Yes.
Nope.
And this will be, I trust, scheduled at a time when the research, after the research has been done.
Right. Because the next plan commission meeting is the 9th. I'm not sure that this would be done by then. We also may have a fairly lengthy commission meeting at that point, so we will determine when the next meeting will be. When we
All right, well, thank you, everyone. I guess that concludes the, oh, I guess we need a motion to adjourn.
I will move to adjourn.
I will second.
all in favor?
Yes.
Okay,
I say yes.
we are done.
All right. Thank you.